I will call the second committee of the whole for 2023 to order. Go with roll call. Alder Feldy.
Present.
Alder Filicki-Pineski. Alder Salazar is excused. Alder Ackley is excused. Alder Ramey.
Here.
Alder Russ is here. Alder Decker.
Here.
Alder Perella.
Present.
Alder Mitchell.
Here.
And Alder Heidemann.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I do not believe we have anybody. Oh, I'm looking for approval of the minutes from the last committee of the whole.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. I don't believe we have anybody for public forum. Alrighty, and Director Krieger.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for coming to the second budget workshop for 2024. I just wanted to take a moment to, like I said, thank you all for coming. We have several departments presenting today, so I just encourage you to ask any questions while the department heads are presenting. And if you have any questions at the end, I'm more than happy to help as well.
With that being said, we will have the city clerk elections and common council by the city clerk, DeBruin.
Thank you. All right. So I arranged the slides a little bit differently because the clerk's office is responsible for 3 different budgets. It's the city clerk, the elections, and council. So the clerk's budget is a lot of the licensing, the mail for the city, board of review. It encompasses all of our salaries for the people that work in the office, employee development, and things like that. Elections budget is just what it says. It's everything election, from ballots to election official salaries, to DPW labor for setting up the polling locations, for having the polling locations, things like that. And then the council budget is your salaries, Chromebooks, the Unicode meetings, that comes out of the council budget. Okay, so that's really the 3. So current and upcoming challenges for our office. So this is all 3 budgets combined. One of the big things that we are doing right now is migrating off of the AS400. We use that every day, all day, for all of the licensing and permitting that we do for the city. So we are doing thousands a year, and so that's what we use the AS400 for. So we just approved a new system, which is HayGov, which we started to implement. Melissa Fossbender is working very hard to get our applications on there. It's going to be very challenging the rest of this year and going into next year because liquor license renewal is a huge time in our office. That happens in May and June, and we'll see how it works. It should be a much better program, but it's going to be complicated the first couple years that we get it started. The second one makes me very sad. Our election specialist is retiring. She's been with the city over 20 years, has a lot of knowledge in her bucket, and she will be leaving early 2024. So that's going to be a big challenge for us. And really in the last few years, elections have always been difficult, but conducting elections, especially in the last few years, and navigating all of the changes that are happening on a daily, weekly basis, and the people that we count on the most at the state, the WEC, cannot give us as much guidance as they have in the past, and so a lot of their responses are ask your city attorney. So Chuck has been a great partner of ours, especially in the last year or so, but even trying to keep up with the statutes and the changes in how we want to handle things as a city continues to be a big challenge in our office. So, known changes. The clerk's budget has, the only known change is for tools and small equipment, and that is due to the IT schedule. The clerk's office is responsible for these computers here, the ones in 305, the ones in 106. and they're all up for replacement in 2024. So that's where that 4,500 comes from. The next slide is elections. And this looks like a really big increase from 2023. If I were to put up the numbers for 2022, it wouldn't look as dramatic, and that's because in the even years, we have 4 elections, in the odd years, we have 2. So it looks very dramatic from 2023. The temporary salaries is, of course, our election inspectors, and that is because of the 4 elections and because of the raises that that you approved this last year. So that's where that money is coming from. Overtime is for the overtime in our office for the 3 people that we have. Office supplies just goes up. That's where all the ballots come from. That's where our machines come from. That's all of those things, the voting booths, everything comes out of there. The $4,000 is really there's a note there that the labor in 2023 was put on the wrong line, so it looks like it's going up, but it's really not. It just was on the wrong line this year. And then maintenance and building repair is the cost to have our polling locations. And so that just goes up because we have more elections. And then for Common Council, it's allocated for new Chromebooks for next year. And then employee development with the League of Municipalities dues increasing. That's just a known increase. So what are we asking for? We're asking for Cheryl's position to hopefully go full-time. It just makes sense. She's a .75, so we're asking that position to go up to full-time just to address all the increased number of changes and requirements surrounding elections. So that would be an ongoing funding source that we would need. We are hoping that what we have been doing in the recent years is using temporary salaries to help when we've needed extra help in our office. So we'd hope that under the temporary salaries would decrease, because if we have somebody in our office more often, it just would help with somebody that has the knowledge and experience to be there full-time. Nothing then for elections, because that's all encompassing, and nothing for the Common Council. Nope. Any questions that I can answer?
Alder Filicki-Pineski.
Thank you. The HayGov application is
Yes.
going to be in your department?
And it's going to be in DPW.
Okay.
And hopefully to the police and fire, because it's going to be for special events as well. So it's going to encompass a lot of different departments.
So I am recalling that some of the licensing moved from your office to Public Works. Is that accurate?
The sidewalk cafes are moving to Public Works.
Just the sidewalk cafes
Yes.
and those permits?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions for the city clerk? Nope. Alder Perella.
So how do these increases relate to the 2020?
To what?
So to the last year that there was the presidential election, and so I just want to, as you said, the increase is pretty dramatic, so I would like to know how it relates to the previous year or the.
Okay, and I think I understand. So like in 2022, I believe the budget was 90,000. So we're asking for 115. So it's
Okay.
25,000 from the budgeted in 2022. The budget for like the polling locations was the same in 2022 as it is in 2024. Overtime was the same in 2022 as we're budgeting for 2024. So it does look much bigger than what happens in the
Very
ebb and
good.
flow of elections.
Very good, thank you. I just needed that comparison, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? See none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Human Resources with Director Westbrook.
Thank you. HR, some of the current and upcoming challenges. I think the biggest challenge facing human resources here at the City of Sheboygan is ensuring that our employees feel valued and recognized for their contributions to the organization. And that comes in multiple forms. That comes in salary and compensation. That comes in health insurance and other benefits. And it comes in employee recognition. So I think that's a delicate dance that every employer has to do to figure out how to make sure that they're keeping their employees satisfied and feel like they want to stay here. Additionally, this is not unique to the City of Sheboygan, but retention and recruitment is probably the biggest issue in every industry right now. With the changes in the labor market, the city needs to do everything possible to ensure that the city remains a competitive workforce, both to recruit and to retain talented employees. And then lastly, with the change of HR director, whenever that person starts, ensuring that the new director has the support and buy-in from the council to continue to make these employee-focused types of changes. So the list of known changes that our HR department knows of, the first is an increase in legal services. If you recall, a few months ago, the council had a budget amendment to move a significant portion of money over to the HR department for legal fees. So this increase in $30,000 is because it has been clarified that the HR department will handle all employee issues prior to a claim being filed. So when it's an investigation prior to someone suing us, that all is going to come out of the HR department's legal fees or legal services, and then once that claim is filed, it moves over to either the city attorney's budget or to CIVMIC. So that's that $30,000. Advertising and marketing is a $3,000 increase. That's just additional contracts. We are now paying so that all of our jobs are boosted on governmentjobs.com. Additionally, we are using LinkedIn more aggressively, which comes with an increase in subscription. And then contracted services has an increase of $8,000. That's like Flores Leave Management, who handles our FMLA, and those contracts which just went up in contract costs. So what are we asking for? I would say three things in this order. The first thing is additional money for employee recognition. That would include 2 city events. Summer, we just had the summer picnic. Thank you for those of you who were able to attend. And then also an event in winter. But that $5,000 would be to create what we're calling exemplary performance awards. Those are essentially bonuses that would happen once a year. Department heads would be able to nominate either their employees or any employee in the city who's gone significantly above and beyond what is being required of them or asked of them, and that employee would receive a monetary bonus, anywhere between $500 and $1,000, depending on how many employees apply. Those department heads would meet to discuss and the city administrator, to discuss and determine who those employees would be that receive that recognition. But that's just one additional way for those employees who really do something exceptional to be recognized. The second thing, which is both a retention and a recruitment thing, would be increasing our ETF life insurance. So, spoiler alert, under the new benefits program, which for open enrollment, which will start in October, ETF is going to be the life insurance carrier, which is through WRS. Currently, the city provides 50% of the cost for an employee's first unit of coverage. In ETF, a unit is the employee's salary. We're covering 50% of that currently. The proposal, this approximately $24,000, would mean that the city is covering the employee's first unit entirely. So every employee would have 1 unit of life insurance covered entirely by the city. Again, a unit is their salary. They can then purchase more if they would like to. This is something that would not be unique to Sheboygan. There are many municipalities and state organizations that already do this, but it is, in talking with USI, our benefit broker, it is a really great way and a huge benefit at not a huge cost that touches every single employee who works for us. So any employee working 20 or more hours is eligible for life insurance through ETF. And then the last thing that we're asking, back when the salary and compensation study came out, there was discussion of how to handle those employees who've been here a really, really long time that might not have been placed far enough or to their liking on the salary schedule. So we have some employees who have been here 20 years that are only one step or two steps ahead of employees who've been here 8 years. So there was naturally this compression because the wage study placed people where it was appropriate, and while it took into account years of service, it didn't really, right? Someone who's been here 20 years wasn't moving to the end of the pay scale. So the proposal at an approximate cost of $26,500 would be to move all employees who've been in their current role for 15 years or more, move them 2 steps on January 1st instead of 1 step. We understand that that's probably not going to be enough for some of the employees, but we hope that that would be some recognition of the appreciation of the fact that they have served the city for 15 years in that same role. This would not apply to employees who have switched roles and have worked for the city for more than 15 years, but went from, being a custodian to being a mechanic, right? Those are different jobs at different points of the wage scale. So it's just current positions for 15 years or more. And again, that cost would be about $26,000 for that. That's it. Questions?
Any questions for Director Westbrook? Alder Filicki-Pineski.
Thank you. When I hear wage study, my hair curls. Just have to say that. So the 26.5 is the cost of that in year 1
It would
for
be
the 15 years plus.
correct.
Okay, so those employees get only 1 bump in their years of service.
They would move an additional step. So a normal employee would move one step. They would move 2 steps.
And that would be the end of it. They won't move
Correct. That is the
any more
recognition
steps.
that we can afford to show our appreciation, but also stay within our reasonable.
So over time, financially, this would accrete to a greater salary?
So it definitely, right, because you're making this initial step,
Yes.
it would, yes, have additional costs, but in 2025, they would just get a 1 step, like everyone else. So it's just this 1 year that they're getting an additional sum. But you are correct, because they're moving 2, in 2025, their total is going to be more than it would have been had they only gotten 1.
So in 2026, if I've been here 15 years, I too get to move 2 steps?
No, this is a one-time, today, employees who've been here 15 years or more in their spot in an effort to get them closer to where they, quote-unquote, should have been when we implemented the wage study. They are moving 2 steps, and then that's where they are. And then from that point forward, every employee moves 1 step on the wage scale.
That was the question. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Director Westbrook? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I take that back. Alder Perella.
And it is more of a general question.
Yeah.
So you say that the biggest challenge facing the HR department is ensuring employees feel valued and recognized, which includes pay, benefits, and recognition. So do you think that you have addressed those, if that is the biggest challenge with whatever you have proposed today, do you think you have addressed that challenge?
So I think in the 9 months that I've been here so far, I think we've already started implementing changes to do this. Our benefits package hasn't come out yet. However, it is mainly finished. And again, for a spoiler alert, for a 3rd year in a row, there's going to be no increase in premiums for employees, which is unheard of for the 3rd year in a row, particularly now. So we're doing a lot already, but I think in the additional asks, right, like the employee events. So the summer picnic that we had, the feedback that we received has been overwhelmingly positive. and overwhelmingly appreciative of that on-work time recognition type of thing. But I think the additional, bonus incentives, the additional benefit of ETF funding, I think those absolutely add to an employee's feeling of recognition. Again, every employee wants to be paid more. Every employee wants to have free health insurance. And so it's those additional things that we can do to make them feel appreciated and valued, knowing that in the government, you're never going to, be making private sector dollars. But I think that the requests, given what the money is, addresses those needs. And really those two the first two together are one issue, right? Retention and recruitment. We need to retain our employees by making sure they don't want to go other places.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Alrighty, thank you, Director Westbrook.
Thank you.
Next, we have Uptown Social with Director Rendell Araujo.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I don't think this will surprise anyone to hear me talk about our biggest challenges since we opened not quite a year ago have just been the sheer number of people coming through our door. I know you've heard me share before that we did not expect our growth to come so quickly. We're actually now just shy of 1,400 members, which is double where we were at the old building prior to the pandemic. So just a huge jump in the number of people that we're seeing on a daily basis and the number of people that our staff are engaging with, but we still have the same staffing levels. It's also just really challenging, especially in the summer, but really in general, with a staff of 3 to make sure that there's always coverage for the building when we're open. We have a beautiful building, lovely facility. I'm not comfortable, nor do I think I ever will be, having the building open without an actual staff member present. And so just scheduling when employees have things that come up, if there are health issues or vacation or whatnot, it's really challenging with only 3 people to navigate that. Coming up in 2024, we're working very closely with DPW to get the gymnasium construction going. So right now we've got about 15,000 square feet of finished space, but next year we're going to be adding another 5,000 square feet of finished space. So not only is that additional space for us to manage and navigate, but we anticipate that new people will come in to utilize that space. I joke about it, but it's kind of not a joke that we'll probably be using that gymnasium for pickleball most of the time. And I hear that pickleball players can be kind of needy and difficult. I'm sorry if any of them are watching. But so there's going to be challenges associated with finding our groove with that additional space and rolling that out and dealing with additional people. And then, of course, a big reason for the justification of investing in the building initially was the anticipated growth of this population of older adults. So that hasn't flattened now that we have a new building. It is projected to continue increasing as additional boomers retire. So, if you recall last year when we did this, I shared that a lot of the numbers we had picked for our 2023 budget were guesses because we didn't really know what the building was going to be like. And so now that we've had some time in our new building, we have better estimates. I know I've come before you before for a budget adjustment now knowing what the utilities are. So the utility change is going up significantly because 1, we know what to expect, but 2, adding additional square feet. So that is additional square footage of finished space for not only the gymnasium, but it's also additional square footage for the space that would be rented out to the tenant that we're anticipating that construction will happen in 2024. That agreement is they will pay for the construction, but as per the proposed lease agreement, we would take on the utilities. Contracted services, again, for 2023, we were really guessing as to what it would cost to run the building. So this is now what we know for the fire suppression system, all of those services. And really, all of these numbers, I consulted very closely with Mike Wilmus of DPW because he and I work very closely together on these items specifically. So as for additional requests, it will surprise no one that we would love an additional full-time employee. When thinking about what would complement the existing staffing that we have now, in the table of organization, you have me, the director. We also have a full-time program and wellness coordinator, which leads a lot of our fitness programs, and also a small portion of that position is working on the city's wellness initiatives in conjunction with the Human Resources Department. And then we also have the full-time engagement coordinator that handles all of our internal and external communication and volunteer coordination and really absorbs a lot of the day-to-day operations of making sure we're running. So what I think would complement these three positions that we have already is really to add an administrative assistant. This would be a less costly position to add. And really what I really would love to have is someone who is based at our front desk. So we do rely on a lot of volunteers, but volunteers are not the same as staff. So they're great when they're there, but they're just not as dependable as staff would be, and often have challenges utilizing our computer systems, a lot of questions, and really many of our volunteers might be working as few as 4 hours a week, so it's hard for them to keep up to date on all things. So when we don't have a staff person helping out at the front desk, our team is very often called in from whatever else it is that we're doing. So really an administrative support person who would be based at the front desk, assist with mailings, all sorts of operational assistant needs, and do some of the bookkeeping work that I'm doing right now. And also, not a big ask at all, but in terms of dollars, but would have a big impact on our organization is we would love to have an intern. Specifically, we'd be open to having an intern help us with a lot of different things, but I would love to have someone who's looking for a career in exercise science that could help fill in for some of our fitness programs, but we could also consider interns to help with communication, operations, really anything. And I think we'll all agree that in 2024, we are past the times of having unpaid interns. It's best to pay them. So those are the only two things that really would make a huge difference to how we can serve Sheboygan's population of older adults. Questions for me?
Any questions for Director Rendell Araujo? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Shoreline Metro and Parking Utility with Director Derek Much. Lynch? What? Mink, sorry.
All right, thank you. We'll start with transit. All right, so current and upcoming challenges continue to be the state and federal mass transit aids. I'm not going to give a training on how transit is funded because it's very complicated. But I will tell you that we do have quite a few funding sources, state and federal mass transit aids being the largest. Most recently, state transit funding moved to the general fund, and federal had been declining funding over the last decade or so. So that remains as one challenge. We also looking to hire bus drivers. Hiring bus drivers just about in the industry, CDL in general, is very challenging. Complicating that were increased CDL requirements that went into effect in early 2022. And again, like I said, industry-wide issue. So bus drivers are just rare breed now, and they're getting harder to recruit for. And then also increasing demand. So trying to sustain operations city and county demand, increasing. The somewhat suburbs of Sheboygan are growing. There's a lot more retail, a lot more development happening, and our services don't reach to those areas. And it's only a matter of time before our demand is going to increase. We have basically, for sustaining operations, our current route structure has been in place. This is going to be the 8th year in 2024, with the city's local share basically increasing only 17,000 over that course of time. So we've done a great job of managing funds, managing operations to continue to meet demand and be responsible with our funding. One thing that's not on here that's a challenge, just want to point out that Transit Union, local ATU, local 998, we are currently in arbitration with, and so we have unknown 2023 wages as far as a percent increase goes, so formulating a 2024 budget was also quite challenging. But we do feel confident in the placeholders that we have for 23 and what we have for 24 as well. So that's all been calculated. So we didn't identify any known increases. We are what's called an enterprise fund. Our budget did have a net increase of about 45,000, but that's should be noted here that revenues are bouncing back. State and federal shares are forecast to stay somewhat stable again in 2024 just because of CARES Act dollars, residual CARES Act dollars that are left. City share would be no increase. So that's kind of the budget highlights for 2024. One expense that we are going to see in the new budget would be IT related expenses. Transit had not been initially charged for IT expenses, but we have we've worked with IT to establish a shared revenue or a shared expense on this item, so that will be hitting our budget in 2024 for the first time. Yeah. I'll stop and pause if there's any questions on transit first.
Alder Perella.
So you said that the city and county demand has increased. Would you be able to quantify that for us? Do you have any rates for that? How much did that demand increase?
It's a forecasted demand. We are going through, one thing we're going through right now is a countywide study. The Sheboygan County is putting that on right now to understand where there's a possibility to, not a possibility, where there are higher demands for transportation, where there currently isn't transportation being provided. I'm not saying Shoreline Metro, the city of Sheboygan, is going to be responsible or the contracted service provider. But if you do the math, there is nobody else in the county to really do that. So we already partner with Sheboygan County for some service. So the theory would be is that if there was an increased demand and there was additional funding sources, that we might be the opportunist partner to do that with. As far as increased demand, we know the town of Sheboygan has expressed interest, and it's only a matter of time before they come online and ask for service. Again, part of our FTA funding and being in our urban zonal area, if these areas around Sheboygan want public transit service, we have an obligation to oblige and partner with them for public transit services. So there's some opportunity, and the town, I believe in the next 2 years or so, probably are going to want service and come online. So there is going to be increases. We also have growth potential within our own city with our industrial parks as well that are currently underserviced or not serviced at all. So those are things that we need to be conscious of as well.
But it's not that we have experienced an increase in demand within our city that we have not been able to satisfy. I agree with you. I understand the idea of the forecast, but as far as the current situation, it's not that we have experienced a inability of satisfying or fulfilling the need.
I would agree. The only thing that I would say is that perhaps we The only thing that we get as far as limited resources is maybe around the clock service or better providing service for third shifters. That's the one thing that we hear a lot more about, but as far as what we provide and when we provide it, we really don't have many issues with reaching the customer base that we have.
Thank you.
Alder Decker.
If, like, let's say the town of Sheboygan would be included in this, what would you would also get funding for that from them, and that would be a part of this deal that they would also have to pay for their service, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It'd be very similar to the Village of Kohler partnership in the city of Sheboygan Falls. It'd also be based on the level of service that we would provide or that they would have. If they choose, fixed route service with paratransit, you could be looking at something very similar to what the arrangement with Sheboygan Falls and Kohler is. If it's something different, perhaps just more on-demand service, it could be less, could be more, just depending upon what they're looking for.
All right.
All right, should we get into parking? All right, so current upcoming challenges. So one very important, perhaps, challenge that we have is condition of assets. Parking lots are aging, require investments. I'd be willing to bet some of them are original asphalt. We have one big ticket item right now, which is Riverfront, requires a substantial investment. Probably not only with the asphalt itself, but issues and utilities perhaps underneath that parking lot. So that's one challenge. Cash payments, coin going extinct. You've heard of it through the pandemic, and now it seems to, again, banks aren't wanting to handle it. So we're forced to, adjust as we are right now with mobile payments. Paying at the meter, paying on your smartphone, or paying through an app or using a computer. And then parking availability. There is a strong perception, I guess, by some that a parking structure is needed in our downtown, but the facts are there's probably nobody in this room that would ever see the return on investment on such a structure. So that seems to be a challenge and a hurdle or perception to overcome. And then looking at using current resources more effectively. So we have a couple parking lots right now that are possibly up for sale for private development. So, looking at using our resources more effectively, working with different properties to, kind of meet their needs without maybe forcing them out of downtown. So those are just some of the challenges that we are facing right now. Again, we don't have any additional requests. We're looking at the way our budget works. Again, it's basically essentially expenses minus revenues equal, or minus assessments equals zero. So whatever revenues the parking assessment districts take in are credited against the expenses. Whatever's left is assessed out to the businesses within those assessment districts. So there is no general tax funds used to support parking operations. So here we don't have any requests aside from, or any forecasted increases aside from wages and benefits again for 2024. So expecting to be more status quo. We are making some investments this year with new signage that accompanies the parking meter changes. So you will see signage going up out at the entrances of our parking lots, as well as some additional signage inside, which will make parking a little bit more flexible for customers. So we are making that investment this year, which shouldn't hit next year's budget, but I guess it's all part of doing business. So I guess with that, I'll answer any questions.
Alder Ramey.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question for you or Director Krieger, but I need someone to help me understand how parking works in general. We heard last week several budget line items were increased in employee parking. I know that we're going to hear more about that tonight with potential parking costs being up to $20,000 for certain organizations in our community. Where does that, why, So my question is, we are charging our city employees to park. Where is that money going, and does it make sense that we're charging our city employees to park?
You want to take that one?
Director Kruger.
I'll try my best. So my understanding is because we have the parking assessment districts, there are requirements of any businesses or entities within those districts to pay for the parking. So that would include any city-owned buildings because we are included in those districts. I might pass off to Chuck if he has additional, or Attorney Adams, if he has any additional background on the parking districts in general, but that is the reason that it's charged currently, is so that it's fair to all of those businesses or entities within the districts.
So if I may, so if I understand, so for example, a coffee shop on 8th Street has the meters there. So it's fair for the people who work at a coffee shop as the same as people who work at City Hall or at the library.
That's my understanding of the intent, yes, so that the expense is spread out amongst the users of the parking in those districts.
I want to also add, I think it has something to do with the fact that we're a separate, basically, budget, and our budget is set up completely different. It's not going from general fund account to a general fund account. It's actually going to, are we an enterprise fund too? Is parking?
Yeah, it's a special fund so that all of the money goes directly to any costs that are related to parking. So the parking utility covers the snow removal of those parking lots, any maintenance or replacement of parking lot or asphalt there is done within that special fund.
So, I'm sorry. What happens to if there's excess, or where does the money come if it costs more what if it doesn't snow at all and it costs nothing, but it costs the library $20,000? Where does that money go, and vice versa? If it costs even more, where does that money come from?
Sure, so I will say that at the moment, with the capital needs that are out there, we're actually the opposite. We need more money in those funds. So the city will have the decision to make if the council wants to move forward with the capital plan of replacing those parking lots, either by fund balance from the general fund, capital fund, or by issuing debt to pay for that. So the city would be covering if it is not completely covered by the fees in that district.
It really actually should be noted that South Pier and Riverfront and Heritage Square, those three districts don't take in revenue, aside from some dock fees that get shared in Riverfront, South Pier. It's basically 100% expenses get assessed out to the businesses that are in that district. It's only the downtown that is generating revenue from meters and parking permits, that there's a revenue stream that goes to offset those expenses. In my time here, I know that the total assessment was as low as about $9,000 one year, and it was $80,000 the next year. So one tumultuous winter coupled with some sort of different expenses that we incur. If we do asphalt repair and things like that, the revenues might be pretty sustainable, but the expenses might fluctuate, and that will cause the assessments to kind of go up and down, peaks and valleys, if you will.
Okay.
But we've never been in a luxury to have more revenue come in than the expenses.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
If you want to know more, I'd be happy to talk offline with you.
Thank you.
I don't want to take up everybody's night
I
tonight.
appreciate that.
Alder Filicki-Pineski.
Thank you. It was something Director Krieger said. If the city has to front the parking utility money, does the parking utility ever pay it back to the city?
Are we talking about capital?
If it is for a capital expense, it would be, I guess, at the time of the budget creation or adoption, that decision would be made. So you could have it that the parking utility owes the city the money back with interest, but that would be a decision that would have to be made at the time. If there is a small, I guess, operating difference, we would usually incorporate that into the actual fees that we're charging to the entities. So it's more of the capital needs that would need to be potentially covered by the city and other funds.
And the city could cover those through bonding for the utility?
Correct.
So the utility doesn't bond by itself. We bond for the utility.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't know in my time here that we've actually bonded for any capital. We've purchased vehicles and things out of our own fund, paying out of our fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Usually what we can purchase will come out of that, but, you know, when you're looking at $750,000, that's not going to be something we can fund. One note, though, is that we can't assess on capital in any of the districts except one. Doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it is. It's written in the ordinance that way.
What district?
South 12th Street, Heritage Square.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Alrighty, thank you, Director Mink. Next up, we have Mead Public Library with Director Erickson.
Good evening. Let's see here. Oh.
Hit the arrows right.
Oh.
Down on the right corner.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, as far as challenges for the library as a department, we're very similar to many of the other departments that have preceded me. Operating funding has not really kept pace with service demands over the years. And so I guess first talk about demands a little bit, just a real quick overview. The libraries in 2023, we're estimating that we're going to have about 250,000 visits to the library building. We're going to check out, check out about 675,000 items. That's both physical and digital together. So pretty big numbers. And as far as active card holders, the library, Mead actually serves a larger library than just the city of Sheboygan. We also serve those communities that don't have libraries. So if you think about Howard's Grove, Cleveland, Wilson, those municipalities, we have a service population that we serve in the about higher 60,000s. And about 48% of current residents have a library card that's been active, and that means they've used it within 3 years. And so our numbers are pretty big. The demand is still very big. It's still coming back to the place that it was before COVID. But as far as then the funding, we're obviously, like a lot of the departments, we're trying to make ends meet. I've been with the city now 10 years in my role, and this is potentially the first year that we've ever had an option, or potentially to go up in the non-personnel part of our budget. And so if you think about the library, it's unique in the sense that we actually have an asset that we loan out to residents. And so that's been flat or cut since I've been here every year. And so we've not been able to keep up with demand, and so that's one of the hard parts is people go to a library to check things out, and we just don't have the materials we once had. So that's certainly one of our problems. When I look back and adjust for inflation and use the DPI statistics, 1996 is the first year that was listed, and we're reduced really over that time by about 1/3 of what our budget was at one time. So that means there's less for people to check out as they come to the library. I do want to make one comment, though. I do appreciate last year's wage survey, the salary study. The library did bump up quite a bit, and part of that was the library used to have a completely separate human resources track for everything. So we weren't on anything to do with the city when I started, as far as we had our own handbook, we had our own some of the salary scale and so on. And so during that time we fell behind, and we're trying to get caught up. So, you know, so if admin assistant is over at the city, they should get paid the same as the library. And so a lot of that last year went to trying to get people up to where they should be. And also I want to thank the council for bumping up our lowest wage workers up to $15 an hour. They truly, truly appreciated that. So that was really cool. Then moving on to the next challenge, I just put each of my challenges on a separate slide. Facility funding is certainly another issue. The library building itself will be 50 years old next year, and there's a lot of things on it that are getting a little bit old, obviously, as we talk about the capital improvement process. There's a roof that will need to be replaced in a couple of years, and that's going to be super expensive. We have some other things. The library itself, the trustees works with we have a foundation as well, and we do try to fund those enhancements that are sort of build outs and things like that within the building itself. But I think the strange part is, as a library, we have our own chapter in the statutes that give the trustees power within the library itself, but the funding is about 2/3 right now from the city. We get also some county funding, we get a little bit of other miscellaneous funding, but it's sort of a strange situation, and really what's happened over the years is we've had a lot of changeover in leadership and different philosophies each time, not only among like city administrators, but also the alders. And so Casey Bradley would be like the fourth city admin that I've worked with in 10 years. So a lot of turnover. We've talked to some of you about having a memorandum of understanding between the library and the city, just so I have an understanding of what I should be coming to the alders for capital improvement. Obviously, with the building costs, some of these things are just an enormous cost, like the roof is going to be very expensive and things like that. But then other things, for instance, like next year, what we're planning on doing in the springtime is building a locker system where residents could pick up their materials 24/7. One of the problems we've got right now is we've got manufacturing companies where people aren't able to make the library during our open business hours. And so by having a locker system in place, they can pick that material up whenever they are available. Obviously, then the library is working on trying to create our own funding for that. And so the nice thing is we're having that foundation in place gives us the ability to raise funds, but also not compete with some of the other things that are very important that you'll be hearing about, such as police cars or ambulance and those other sorts of things. So I think that having the foundation is really important. And just, I think going back to that idea of an MOU, I would love to see us pursue that down the road. We found one recently that Hartford just put in place, but then we could actually kind of work together and not have this be an issue every year where who's paying for what at the library. It would be nice to just sort of have an understanding in place. And so I think that's super important to have as well. I wanted to mention last week the DPW presentation by Director Biebel and City Engineer Mike Wilmus had talked a little bit about centralizing some of the facilities inspection and planning and that sort of thing. I just wanted to advocate for that. I think that's a really good idea. We don't have building facilities engineers on staff. And so we do our best. We've been doing our best for all these years, but it would be nice if we could work together better. And then as alders, you would get a sort of more of a unified plan in place for CIP moving forward. So I just wanted to advocate for what David Biebel had talked about last week. And then my last challenge is really, we called it social services, but just over the years, the library, I guess when I started 10 years ago, the big thing was the teens. The teens are running up and down the stairs and everybody was upset and this and that. But really it's changed over the years since I've been here to, we have a lot of adults in our community who have different problems going on in their lives. And especially during the winter time, the library is the shelter of the city. And so they're there during the day. and our staff is not really trained to deal with it. And so in 2019, we went away from a private security company and hired a security specialist. And when she started, I know anecdotally I heard from at least our beat cop said that the number of calls to the police department went way down because that person was able to take care of a lot of things. And so that person not only enforces, like the policy and the behavior stuff, but they're really trying to refer people to different agencies within the community that can help them. So you have an addiction issue to alcohol, maybe it's the 1907 Club, or a homeless issue, they go to the Salvation Army. But we have all those resources there now. We have a person that's really well-versed in what's available in the community, so they do referrals. They're not a social worker, so they can't get into certain things, but I think that person has added a lot of value to the community, and what we're asking in a little bit, we'll be talking about some more help for that person, but just wanted the council to know that that is a big challenge for us, is trying to work with those difficult populations. Director Westbrook had met with me earlier and talked about our survey at the library, and one of the things the staff are concerned about, and I know a lot of the external departments are having this trouble, but is dealing with some of these issues out in the community. So that is certainly something we're trying to figure out how to do better, is working with those communities. Let's see, list of known increases. So I've got several here. Just I'll hit the highlights. Like the top one is just material costs, obviously, as we talked about, are going up every year. So that's reflected in the 30,000 ask for to bump up. Contracted services, we are Mead is part of a larger consortium called the Monarch Library System. It's 32 libraries within 4 counties. We're the flagship library. They have raised their costs as many organizations have, and so that's up about 5,000 for next year. And then jumping down, utility costs we've been told to go with a 5% increase, so 6,500 on that. So those are some of the known increases for next year. And then so to finish up, we have 3 requests. And the first one would be 2 part-time security monitors. So as I mentioned, the security person that we have is typical 40 hours. The library is open more than 40 hours, and so we thought we'd get 2 part-time positions that would really be primarily for weekends and evenings to help out the staff, so that staff can actually do more traditional library services, finding information, helping people with job searches or whatever, reading to youth, those sorts of things. And so 2 positions, I do think there's a good return of investment. I mean, again, as I said, hopefully we don't need to depend on the police as much if we can take care of some of these things in-house. And then the second one that we've got listed is more of a teen librarian. So right now staffing we don't have enough staff to keep things open all the time. So I think one of the great services the library provides that isn't talked about much is for the kids when they get off of school, especially like from Central, they all walk over to the library, and we provide a place for them we provide safe, structured environment for them. So we have stuff for them to do, and they're supervised, and so we think that's a good service we provide. We'd like to have that open more if we could. So there are days when it has to be shut down because we just don't have the staff. And so that is request number 2. And then finally, the last one, where the library metrics are going way up is really in the digital content checkout. And so unfortunately, those costs are pretty expensive, the way the vendors have done it. And so what we're asking for is an increase to help cover those costs as some of those contents are actually checked out more and more. So we also have, if you haven't been over to the library recently, we have a lot of other things available that may not just be books. We have museum passes. We consider the library not really a book warehouse. We consider it a place of learning. And so there is a lot of things over there. If you haven't been there, you can check out experience passes, we call them. So going to a museum in Milwaukee or things like that. So there's several things, but these are all really content focused as you think about it. And these were all in priority. We do think the security officers would be the most important thing, followed by the teen librarian and then the collections. So I guess I'll open this up to questions.
Any questions for Director Erickson? Alder Perella.
I think I know the answer, but just to confirm, the 70,000 for the expansion of the library's e-book, et cetera, is separate, does not include the 30,000 that is.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we're saying this would be over and above
Yeah.
yes. And so the 30 is really the inflationary cost. We have not touched that for many, many years.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thank you,
All right,
Director
thank you.
Erickson. Next up, we have Sheboygan Police Department with Chief Domagowski.
Good evening, everybody. So our current challenges, and I'm going to call them opportunities too, because all of our challenges contain opportunities, I believe. And so we should always be looking to do better, and any place that we have a problem gives us that chance. So most of what you're going to hear from me, as Garrett said and everybody else, they're all really the same issues throughout the city. So you heard Director Biebel, you'll hear Monty, and you've heard everybody else, succession planning and the current staff. So I'll again say, I think this is really a huge opportunity. It's a couple years that we're really going to have to focus and make sure that we take the right steps to get people where they need to be. But we have a new assistant chief, 2 new captains, half of our lieutenants are new within the year, a couple of our sergeants, and about 35% of our officers have 5 years or less. And so we have some really terrific, talented new officers that are doing great, but it's that 5-year level that I see it, that they get those experiences that they're able to build on and really learn from. And those are key areas where our sergeants really have to be engaged and take advantage of the opportunities to teach and coach and mentor. So we got a lot of work ahead of us the next couple of years, but it's going to pay huge dividends, I think, in the future. So that's really where a lot of our focus comes. Another challenge that we have is keeping up with policy changes, state law training, state law changes, developing the training on both policies and those best practices so that everybody is consistent across the board. And part of that is what I'm going to call unfunded mandates. Everybody that wants us to do more training on specific areas, that's pulling people off the street. And so we're not able to deliver services because we're spending all of that extra time training. So big challenges there. Meeting the resource capacity to conduct proper background investigations to successfully hire the best candidates. And so you heard Adam talk about this a little bit. It's a process for the police department and the fire department that used to look like we would post a job once a year or once every 2 years, and we would get 500 to 1,000 candidates and create a list with all kinds of people on it, and those people would hang around for 2 or 3 years to get hired. That doesn't happen anymore. We get people like everybody else here that we need to try to offer them jobs within the first couple of weeks or they're gone. And so for us, one of the challenges is taking our detectives off of the other priorities they have and getting them the time to do proper background investigations. So one of the things we'll be asking for, you'll see that. Employee wellness was addressed. So in policing, like everywhere else, that it's a huge need. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then just generally personnel resources. So as the city continues to grow, especially southbound, our personnel resources are challenged quite often. I don't want to be overly dramatic here or pretend to make it look like we're in a crisis state, because we're not, okay? We're going to prioritize things, and we're going to get to things when we can, is what I'm telling you. We currently do it. We created deferred dispatch 14 years ago to help deal with this. Everybody can't have a police officer immediately. Some of the calls that we're getting, they can be more effectively managed if they're not getting somebody immediately, but getting the same person to deal with an ongoing problem. So those are what our challenges are. So our list of known increases, we're asking for essentially a net increase of $22,000 for our overtime, and that's just to deal with the rising salaries. As they go up, there's less available. One of the areas that this is going to be important to us is trying to deal with some of the issues that we have now that many of you hear about all the time. Residents would like more traffic enforcement, more stop sign enforcement, and those kinds of things. We can do some directed patrol with overtime funds if they're available to address some of those things that we can't do through our normal patrols, depending on what our call volume is looking like. So laboratory fees, this is for OWI tests. And so this is a $2,000 increase, and this is really just to reflect our costs over the last couple years. So we've budgeted $3,000 the last couple years. Last year, it was $4,400 that we spent, and we're on target to do that this year too. So that's where that comes from. Investigative services, this has several things in there, but one of them is what we call law enforcement ordered tows. So those are cars that we're towing, either our vehicles or vehicles that are evidence that we need to tow. Over the last several years, we've gotten a break in this area because one of our local businesses essentially put in a bid on this that got him all of this business, and he wouldn't send us bills. But he's now retired, so that's not any longer there. So this account is going to go up quite a bit just because he finally retired and went out of business. Software and maintenance subscriptions. So we have a bunch of different softwares that we use for evidence collection. Chorus and Axiom deal with essentially cloning computers, tablets, cell phones, and then having the ability to analyze, extract, and do all of those kinds of things with evidence there. So that those two programs are what that increases for. Vehicle and parking expenses are just the increase for our SROs to use their own vehicles to go back and forth to the schools, and the increase in the mileage reimbursement rate. Building and maintenance repair is going up a little over $2,000, and that mainly has to deal with the fire suppression system cost of that contract. Utilities is, like everybody else mentioned, the 5% increase. Office equipment, that pays for all our copy machines, and so that's just the same thing, inflation going up. Janitorial services, $1,100, and that's the cost of supplies. And then phones, all of our officers have cell phones, and so that's the cost of that plan. They have lots of things that they use their phones with, and using cell phones now has allowed us to reduce some of the other costs that we have. So they're using their phones as cameras now, as recorders, where in the past we would have both systems. So there is some savings there also. The additional requests that we have, for me, the biggest area of risk in the department is with policy, making sure that policy is not only updated, but that everybody's trained on it, knows what it is. And so we're asking for an additional lieutenant of administration position. When we did the reorganization, we identified that as a need. That position would also develop training, deliver training, and cover that area. They would handle major internal investigations, and they would allow us to potentially take on accreditation again. So we were an accredited agency up until 2008 when the city eliminated the position that did all of that work. I would say that in the last couple years, that's been one of the hot topics. So both CIVMIC at our annual work meeting tries to encourage the city administrator that we become accredited again. And my position always has been that we're happy to do that, but not without the position, because we can't drop that work on anybody right now. It will never get done. And then additionally, as part of the police reform movement, there is a big push for accreditation, and some of the grants that we apply for at this point require some accreditation, which we've been able to do, but not full accreditation. Then I mentioned the issue with our background investigations, so another need that we have and the ask that we're requesting is for hiring a part-time background investigator. Would be a civilian employee, most likely somebody with law enforcement experience that would be able to do this. And then in the time that they're not doing backgrounds, they would help with our fraud investigations and potentially some of our computer crime stuff. Our third ask is for wellness. So we talked about this before. This year we were able to implement wellness checks. So we've had a contract with a licensed clinician who came in and spent an hour with every employee in the police department, gave them a chance to unload things, do referrals and all of those kinds of things. So we were able to pay for that this year with grant funding, but we no longer have the grant funding. So if we're going to continue that, we're going to need to add those funds in the budget. And then lastly, our ask would be, if possible, if we could get 2 additional patrol officers. And again, that has to do just with the level of calls for service in the city expanding the way that it is. So trying to cover those areas. I can take questions.
Any questions for the police chief? Alder Perella.
What has the feedback been about the annual wellness from the employees?
They loved it. We are able to contract with a very talented individual, Ignacio. He was an Appleton police officer for 15 years and went to school and got his degree and had a side business. He's no longer a police officer in Appleton now, and the demand for him is wild. He has just an incredible personality and the ability to really connect with people and make them feel comfortable. And the fact of his past experience, I think, makes people feel safe talking to him. So it's been terrific.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Alder Decker?
The background investigator, would that be something that would, be shared with other departments too? Like say the fire department or things like that, it would just be police, or it would just be?
For right now, it would be police. If that's something that HR thought was necessary and we wanted to explore that, we would have to have those conversations.
Okay.
Alder Perella.
Do you mind, please, explaining the accreditation and the accreditation duties?
Sure. What an accreditation looks like is there's an accreditation agency. There's WILETA, which is the Wisconsin accreditation agency, and there's also CALEA, which is a national one. And so similar to fire, they set national standards on what policies you should have and what those policies look like. And so your policies have to fall in line with that, and then you have to essentially do what they call proofs. And so that means you need to take each policy and go and find, so usually it occurs over a 3-year period. So over that 3-year period, you would have to provide examples of where that policy was in place and an incident that related to it, and prove that you're following the policies that you have. There's independent reviewers from outside that come in and review all of that, and the public's allowed to comment and take feedback and all of those kinds of things.
So it is an optional accreditation by a third party that you would get that way, right?
Correct.
It's not a mandatory one or one that has the lack of has a negative impact on the department.
I don't, well, I guess that's debatable, right? So in this case, it's way for something to be audited on the outside. Essentially, the point that I've taken is that we have good policies. We do our best to make sure that they're updated and that they're trained on and all of those things. And better that way than, how do I say this? Having somebody that's auditing you that's not really auditing you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Chief. Last but not least, we have Fire Chief Montoya.
Don't try to say the last name. Monty, good.
Sorry, there was one correction, so I'm bringing up a updated version quick. It's downloading.
So a man walks into a bar. All right, thank you, young lady. All right, thank you. And as Alder Russ said, saving the best for last. So here we go. I'll make this quick. I know you all have had a busy day and you've been here doing a lot of things. So thank you for the time. As most of the department heads have said, there's a lot of challenges that everyone's facing, and fire department's no different. We have a lot of aging buildings. The 5 stations, they're requiring a higher cost of maintenance. Most of them are not ADA compliant. And they're not gender neutral. For those of you that have been through tours of our station, you know this and you've seen it. Unfortunately, we also have, due to the ages, a lot of plumbing issues where we will often have some sewage back up into the living areas, which is unacceptable. So those have to be addressed. Our vehicles, again, through the years of kicking that can and putting off the replacements, higher cost of maintenance, several of them have fallen apart, as you guys have known and heard me say in council, and I do appreciate all the support, but we're working on that. Delays in production and purchasing. We're currently seeing anywhere from an ambulance to 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and then an engine or a fire truck anywhere from 3 to 4 years. So the purchasing options have to change. The city is continuing to develop, which is great. Our population is also aging, so that has an impact on the services we provide, especially the emergency medical services. So our ambulances are often out on multiple calls, so meaning that there are 2, 3, 4 ambulance calls at the same time. Frequent vehicle breakdowns, as you heard me say a few weeks ago, that has an effect on the service we provide with with the transports. Because we're busier, there's also an increase in the transport time because we are going to the hospital, coming back, turning around and going to a further point instead of the station, et cetera. So this creates the need to put a 4th ambulance in service. Currently, we have 3 frontline ambulances in service 24/7, so that creates that need for that 4th ambulance. And then, as you will hear me speak, or some of the assistant chiefs speak, we have increased workload. Our call volume is increasing. All hazard response capabilities that the fire service provides, training mandates, the fire inspections and the risk reduction that we provide to the community, all those have an impact and create a need for a full-time inspector, and I'll explain that, as well as a training officer, later in the presentation. So real quick, just to go over these, like everybody's mentioned, we have a lot of ancillary items that we have no control over. Our overtime budget, as I mentioned earlier with that ambulance, the 4th ambulance, the need for it, we've been putting that in service with the use of overtime dollars. So we're asking for an increase of $80,000. However, that would be affected later on in the presentation. You'll see if some options were done that way. That would decrease that overtime. Our clothing allowance, just cost of materials have gone up. Building repair, 7% increase due to the services that we have that maintain our buildings. Our oils and lubricants, again, have gone up due to the vendor. We are in need of putting a phone in one of our ambulances in a router, so we have the ability to transmit our information to the hospitals while en route. Our software, our current RMS system that we have for our reports, we're required to send the feds information on every single incident we respond to. That our current system was bought out and is being no longer supported. So we're going to have to look at another RMS system, and that's why that cost is there. The office equipment per James Imaging's going up. We have to annually test our hose hoist system for our hose towers, so that's included in that cost. Bernie had suggested due to the deductible that we increase it, so that's why the $1,800 increase. Utilities, and then some radios, and I'll speak about those later on, but that also has an increase in cost. Continuing on, we have to do our bench testing for our SCBA bottles. Those are the self-contained breathing apparatus that we use when we go into volatile environments. So we have to test that every 2 years, so that has to go up. Our janitorial, as Director Bebo mentioned last week, has gone up as well, so 40% increase in that. The IT small equipment is our computer replacement program based on the suggestions from IT. And then our gas prices as well is estimated, and then our vehicle, like I said, our vehicle maintenance. Okay, so now getting into the requests, and I will tell you, I know it's been a long time coming, and I know it's a sticker shock. However, all I can say is where we're at in today's age with the call volumes and all this, it has a direct effect on the services. So the Sheboygan Fire Department has seen a reduction in staffing like many of the departments here in the city since 2008. Our calls for service has increased over 85% in that time. We went from a call volume of 3,600 calls roughly to over 6,800 today. I will say you all should be very proud of the services that your fire department provides to this community as all the other city departments. They are top notch. I would not say that if I didn't mean it. The men and women that provide the service. However, it is taking a toll on them. So the first ask that we have is in order to plan on succession planning. Right now, when we promote to a battalion chief level, we look at the captain level, which is that next level beneath them. So currently we have 3 captains. We'd like to go and promote 3 lieutenants to captains, so we have the ability to have that training. When the BCs are off, the captains act up in their position, as well as they would be in charge of each station. Currently, we have 5 stations, so those captains would oversee each of those stations with another captain at Station 3 overseeing the EMS and assisting with that. So that is a request for the promotion to captains. We are also asking for 6 additional firefighter paramedics. And as I've mentioned many times, it's in relation to that 4th ambulance. Assistant Chief Lubert is here to explain a little bit of the background with the medical and the EMS provision. So AC.
All right, thank you for your time tonight. So I'm just going to touch on why we need our firefighter paramedics and our 4th ambulance in service in the city of Sheboygan. So an increase in firefighter medics will allow the department to staff our 4th frontline ambulance at Station 4, which is the far north side fire station. That'll provide the same level of service that the residents in Stations 1, 2, and 3 get right now for their ambulance responses, as well as decrease the amount of time residents wait for an ambulance during our overlapping calls. So we have a lot of overlapping calls with our increased call volume. Emergency service response requests have seen the most significant increase in the department's call volume. Last year, the department's overlapping calls for service occurred 66% of the time. That means 66% of the time we have more than one emergency call, ambulance call, fire call, or something going on at the same time, which means multiple stations are on multiple calls. Last year, the department's overlapping calls for service, it required us to have aid from other agencies outside of the Sheboygan Fire Department, where we had to request ambulances. In 2022, the Sheboygan Fire Department requested Orange Cross ambulance to respond into the city 43 times, and that was due to all of our ambulances being busy on emergency calls at the same time. That doubled from the year prior in 2021, when we only had to call them in 20 sometimes. So that's nice. We work with our community partners. We help them out. They help us out a lot. The problem is that just like everybody has staffing issues right now, they also have some severe staffing issues. Sometimes when we ask for an ambulance from the county, it might not be coming from St. Nick's, it could be coming from Plymouth, or it could be coming from Sheboygan Falls or Oostburg. That means our citizens or the communities waiting 15 minutes for an ambulance to respond. In addition, our ambulance run 2 paramedics on our ambulances. They run 1 paramedic on their ambulance, and at times, because of their staffing issues, they've brought ambulances into the city with basic life support, which means we have to take a firefighter off of our fire truck and send them on the ambulance so that they can continue the advanced life support care that they started on scene before the ambulance arrived. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but that does happen at times. So there are some of the issues that we face with our ambulance staffing shortage. So the other thing that's happened is the local hospitals, they've asked our department to provide more hospital-to-hospital transports for critical patients that require a higher level of care. One of the things we've seen in the city of Sheboygan is the hospitals are busy. They're full, they have a lot of critical patients. Sheboygan always kind of, I always want to say they get the short straw here because you're in between 2 big cities, Green Bay and Milwaukee, so we don't have a lot of services. The hospitals, and this is due to other ambulance services not being available, are calling us to provide transports for patients from either St. Nick's or Aurora to Green Bay, or to St. Luke's, or to Freighter, or to a cardiac cath lab. So these are emergent transports for patients that are citizens of the city of Sheboygan that are having heart attacks, or they need trauma care. There's kids that need to go to Children's Hospital. So these are emergent transports that we take them as we can, and we've worked hard to provide that service to the hospitals as they've asked. But at times, we're also busy and we can't provide those services. So that means these patients that are sitting in these hospitals that are the citizens or our community members are having to wait 30 minutes or 2 hours, an hour for an ambulance to free up to take this patient from hospital to hospital. So a couple things that our fourth staffed ambulance will do for us. It's going to increase the department's response depth for our overlapping 911 calls. It's going to allow for more emergency hospital-to-hospital transports of these critical patients. It'll provide opportunity for our shift personnel to participate in department-wide training without being interrupted on call response. Our newest members are always on our ambulances, so because our ambulances are so busy, it's hard to get their training completed for the year and meet our requirements for our ISO and our EMS training. A lot of times we have to do double the training to get this stuff done. So with 4 ambulances in service, we can rotate them through a little bit better. It's going to decrease our unit hour utilization. So our unit hour utilization is the measurement that looks at the balance between ambulances being busy on calls and then them being freed up to go on these EMS runs. So right now we're kind of at that peak point where our ambulance unit hour utilization is high enough that we need to add a 4th in ambulance. And then, so thank you very much.
Is this yours?
This one's mine.
Okay. Okay, and this next ask, that third request is, ties into all this, is the addition of a full-time inspector. Currently, Division Chief Noster is our only member in the Fire Prevention Bureau. He's wearing multiple hats. He does help assist with all the inspections, re-inspections, that does all the community risk reduction. He does all the public education as well, planning on that, and continues, as well as fire investigation, as well as his administrative duties. So Division Chief Noster is here to explain a little bit about the inspector.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. A lot of what we've talked about is reactionary. So training for events that will happen when that event occurs, responding to that event. As AC Lubert said, we're busier than ever. Our call volume has gone up 85% since 2008. Fire risk reduction, community risk reduction is one of the core concepts of the fire service. Should be proud that Sheboygan was one of the first in the state to have a robust fire education program dating back to the 40s. We pride ourselves on continuing that, just like the dynamics of the calls that we respond to have changed over the years. So has the role of the fire inspector and community risk reduction. It's not just trying to stop fires from occurring, it's all hazards within our community. So it's helping the elderly so that they're not falling. We partner with the ADRC to get the ball rolling on that. We have partnered, since the county dropped their car seat program, more with Aurora to do car seat installs and help provide car seats for the community. We have increased our fire extinguisher training. We have some coming up at the library at the end of September, I believe, for the second year in a row. We worked with NEMAC to provide extinguisher training for 250 of their employees just recently. Installing smoke alarms in the community to help with that early notification of an incident occurring. Speak at the condo associations to help provide education to their people of what to do in the case of an emergency. We also do our yearly fire inspections. The Inspection Prevention Bureau used to have 3 full-time positions in the early 2000s. It was completely eliminated in the end of 2010. One position was added back in 2017, but we lost a lot of ground in that time. We have around 1,900 occupancies that we do yearly fire inspections on, and in 2018, we conducted little over 1,900 inspections on 1,860 of those annual properties. The city's grown, that's great. We have more buildings, we have more businesses, that's great. That's increased the demand for some of those inspections. And over those years of the Bureau being cut, the follow-up on inspections laxed, and more of these properties are having violations. We're trying to build a robust reinspection program to follow up on those, and it just hasn't been where we need to continue to provide a safe community. Adding this inspector will assist me. It'll improve consistency among looking for code violations in the community, documenting that, working to build our pre-incident planning for when we do have those events occur, and really partnering more with that community. It'll expand upon the education that we provide to the community. We just started last week our fall fire prevention program going into the schools, where we're going to educate 3,500 youth in kindergarten through 4th grade. Continuing to expand that. It allows myself to partner with building inspection as the city continues to grow and build, to really dive into those plans and make sure that the infrastructure that we're building for the community, the development that we're bringing into the community, that it is the best and is the safest for the community. It's going to continue expanding upon those re-inspections to make sure that these property owners are having safe properties for our community. And again, as we continue to be busy and busy and busy, this will take some of the inspection duties off of the crews and allow them to focus more on the training to prepare for the all hazards incidents that we end up responding to. Are there any questions at all about the inspection, prevention, community risk reduction side of things?
Okay, and then our final personnel ask would be a full-time training officer. Currently, that role is provided by a battalion chief, a shift battalion chief. That individual works 24 hours a shift like the rest of the crews. Unfortunately, this involves three different personnel, not only the battalion chief that's doing this on duty, the assistant chief of operations also is doing the training. The assistant chief of EMS is also doing the training. And then Nick will also do the fire inspection training. So we have 4 different players doing, providing training, which makes their job more difficult because it takes away from what they're supposed to be doing as administratively. The shift BC should be running the shift, training with the shift, et cetera, instead of putting on, he is developing all the training, and because he's putting in 8 hours every shift day, the other duties and responsibility he has are, it's noted, it's lacking, so we have to constantly jump in there, so it makes it difficult. And then to wrap it up real quick, our portable radios, currently the ones we use on incidents are this current model is not being supported by Motorola. So in anticipation of that, our current batteries are failing. So we need to replace our batteries because we don't know how we're going to get the new portable radios just yet. So we're going to try to kind of balance it. So in order to save some money and extend the life of the current ones that we can still use, they just won't be maintained in the future. We can get the radio batteries that will extend the life of those. We'd like to do some training. So again, these are all extra, non-anticipated, non-platform. So some of the Calm the Chaos is a program for our officers to develop their incident command skills. With the development of more EVs, electric vehicles in the community, we need some training on that because that is something that's unique and we have not really had the training to deal with those incidents just yet. We require all the businesses to maintain their oven ducts, their exhaust ducts above the stoves. Yet in all our stations, they've never been maintained. And because of the way we operate, we have to have somewhat commercial stoves. So our exhaust system, the ducts have never been cleaned. So that's why we're asking for that. And the final request is some other ancillary administrative training opportunities for the administrator chiefs. So that's what that request is there. So I will end it there and take any questions. The last thing I'd like to say is that, again, as I mentioned, you should be proud of it. You just need to decide and determine what level of service you want to provide and have the fire department continue to provide to the community. And I realize it's a lot to ask, but when you don't continue this and when you don't plan for it years and years and years, all of us are playing catch up. So this is the point we're at right now. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for the fire chief? Holder Fulicki-Pineski.
Thank you very much. Do your current firefighter job descriptions describe that in addition to fighting a fire or being an EMT or a paramedic, they also do XYZ? Do your current job descriptions say that?
They do say a multitude of different activities, and the caveat being, other duties as assigned by the fire chief. Yeah. Okay. So as Division Chief Noster mentioned, currently all our crews go out and do fire inspections, but it has an impact on the number of trainings they do, and we have a lot of criteria that we are given mandated by the state or the feds to maintain our certifications. So it makes it difficult, and we're juggling, so yeah.
Okay. Can I do another one?
Go for it.
I recall that this council authorized the purchase of a new ambulance.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that ambulance number 4?
So that is actually a replacement. It will end up being ambulance 4 in reserve. well, not that new one would go to the front line, one of the 3 current ones that we have. But we won't sell that other one, so we'll keep a reserve. Because, again, when all our ambulances are gone, we do occasionally have the callbacks where off-duty personnel come in, but there's no unit for them to take, so you would need that. So I believe the one we just ordered will be our 5th ambulance for that reserve. Because, again, we're anticipating trying to put this 4th ambulance in service. As I mentioned, we are putting it in service during the day with overtime dollars. However, it is not sustainable in the long term because it does have an effect on our crews, on our personnel, because they're being forced back into that position from off-duty. And so that's kind of where we're in a dilemma right now. And the call volume is not decreasing. I will, as Chief Domagowski mentioned, with the growth and the development, which is phenomenal and fantastic for the city, it does have some ancillary costs to all the services. So it's just not fire, it's police, public works, et cetera.
I was also hearing that you had mutual aid agreements and that you periodically call in Orange Cross.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard, 43 times for overlap?
No, 44% of our calls are overlap. 43, I believe, was the amount of times we've called Orange Cross in to assist. Correct? 66%. Yeah. Yeah, 66.
43 times.
So the Orange Cross came into the city 43 times, and then, but 66% of our call volume from our overlapping calls.
Okay, 66% overlap, but you only needed the mutual aid for 43 from Orange Cross.
That's only EMS from Orange
Only
Cross. Yeah,
EMS.
we've also had assistance from surrounding fire departments during large structure fires or, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Fire Chief.
Thank you for your time.
Alrighty, that is it. I would like to thank Director Kruger for all her work getting this together, and all of the directors for presenting and telling us their challenges and their requests. Our next meeting is tentatively October 16th, 2023. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. We are adjourned at 7:35.